Hey, Tom Dienhart, welcome to Gold and Black Live. Great day today. I got Brian Neubert, my first guest. We're going to have Mark Herman and Stuart Schweiger as well. Two number 9s, two former Purdue football icons. And as usual, this edition of Gold and Black Live is brought to you by State Farm, Trent Johnson, TrentIsMyAgent.com, Triple X Family Restaurants, on the hill but on the level. Of course, Purdue tradition since 1929. And of course, when tomorrow's a big day, stay at HGI tonight. Again, kicking off today's segment, October 18th, we got the great Brian Neubert. Brian, the basketball season obviously is right at our doorstep. Practices have begun, and tomorrow there's going to be, I guess, a fan day and a scrimmage. Talk a little bit about what's going to go on at that event on Saturday.
Yeah, Purdue, kind of in lieu of Midnight Madness, as a lot of places around the country do. Purdue, the last couple of years at least, has done this Fan Day event on a Saturday in October, and basically they sign autographs from 11 to noon, or I think that's the time frame. And then the men's basketball team has historically done 3 10-minute split squad scrimmages for fans to attend. So that's what Purdue will do tomorrow. This is essentially the first time this team will play in front of a crowd in Mackey Arena. Only so much you can tell from it. Obviously, when you split the team in half, things are obviously a lot different than they would be if the whole team was playing together against someone else, but still pretty interesting nonetheless. We'll have coverage, analysis, video all through the weekend from it as well, so fans can keep an eye out for that.
What are going to be 2 or 3 things that you're going to be, I guess, watching for as you watch this exhibition?
Yeah, it's always tough with this thing because, you know, the team's split in half, so you can't really talk about lineups because they're all going to be disjointed. Now, that being said, there are 3 sessions, all of which with different teams, so sometimes certain combinations find their way together. You don't want to put too much stock in, like, shooting. Purdue's had great shooting teams shoot lousy in this thing for whatever reason. But what's always interesting about this is the first time you really get to see the newcomers. Purdue has a couple guys who are really going to help them this year. Jahad Proctor, first and foremost, the grad transfer from High Point. This is essentially his first opportunity to show Purdue fans what he can do to play in a competitive environment in Mackey Arena in front of a crowd. Isaiah Thompson, the freshman guard, is really going to help Purdue this season. I think how much, that's being determined right now because Purdue has a couple other guys who can play point guard, a lot of guards in general. Brandon Newman has had a really good preseason, I think, from a shooting perspective. I know fans are really eager to see him. He's a guy people will be watching closely. Mason Gillis, you know, Purdue's got a lot of options suddenly at the 4 with Evan Boudreau playing there, with the possibility, too, that Purdue's going to play 2 big men together more often. So I don't know if Mason Gillis is on the fast track to big minutes as he seemed to be maybe when things were just him and Aaron Wheeler when it looked that way. But obviously this is everybody's first look at him as well. So I think that's the most superficial thing you can point to an event like this is what have you not seen yet that you're seeing for the first time on Saturday. So I think the newcomers are typically the most interesting part of it.
You've had a chance to sneak a couple peeks at the team in practice, talk to players, talk to coaches. Any real revelations from your early observations, early conversations from the personnel and the players on the team?
I don't think so necessarily. Beyond what I talked about a lot during the summer, you know, Purdue is going to play a little bit bigger this season. Obviously, you know, Purdue has to kind of redefine itself offensively post Carson Edwards, post Ryan Klein. Those were the guys their entire offensive game plan last season were based around, to get them shots and to play off of them. Now, you know, things shift to the front court where Purdue is going to play more through Matt Harms and Travion Williams, I think, more than ever. But playing through the inside doesn't just mean playing with them at the basket. I think they're going to put the ball in their hands a lot. I think Matt Harms is a good pick and roll guy, potentially a good pick and pop guy. Travion Williams is a very good passer for a big man. So I think those guys are going to be put in a lot of positions to do things all around the floor, not just on the interior. We talk about the interior too. They're going to find ways for Nogel Eastern to become more of a scorer as well. That could mean rolling him into post-ups. That could mean just kind of running more ball screens for him, whatever it may be, to try to get a defender on his hip let him get that big body to the basket. Jahad Proctor is the same way. He posted up quite a bit at High Point. I know that High Point and Purdue are two very different things. He is not going to be Purdue's alpha scorer the way he was High Point's alpha scorer, so they're not going to run as much stuff for him. That could help him because he's not going to be the marked man on defensive scouting reports. It'll be interesting to see how they use those two big-bodied guards from a scoring perspective, too. So I think just the overall philosophical focus of this team offensively changes almost entirely.
You know, Big Ten Media Days was quite a while ago, but just give fans some type of a perspective, some type of a context on how the experts at least envision the top part of the Big Ten shaping up this year and where Purdue fits in that equation in the 2019-20 Big Ten season.
I think I put Purdue third on my ballot. That was the consensus because I think that's where Purdue was picked. I think, if I recall correctly, obviously Michigan State was number one. They're probably number one in the country to start the season. That's going to be a unanimous preseason favorite pretty much with all they have coming back. Maryland is generally considered number two. They've got obviously a lot of talent coming back. They've had a lot of talent before and not had the sort of seasons people have expected them to. So here's another opportunity for Maryland. Purdue's right there, probably around number three. Ohio State's in there. Michigan, nobody really knows quite what to expect from them. People expect big things from Illinois for some reason. Not really sure why. They were terrible last season. Lost bad a lot down the stretch, too. I know they've got some talent, but they didn't do a whole lot late in the season last year to show that they had turned a corner and that momentum is going to be picked up now. Outside of that, I thought Iowa has really been deep sixed by Bohannon's injury. I think that took them out of the conversation to be in the top half of the Big Ten to start the season. I think Indiana has a lot of questions. But I think when you look at the top of the Big Ten, it's pretty clearly Michigan State number one, and then Maryland, Purdue, Ohio State in that next three, whatever order you want to put them in.
Who's your dark horse?
I don't know if I have a dark horse.
Minnesota?
I guess I would say Purdue. Well, I was going to say Minnesota when they had Eric Curry coming back because I thought he was going to be a good player, and I thought he would give them something in the front court that would help them offset the loss of Jordan Murphy ever so slightly. They've got some good young pieces. They've got some good pieces, period, in Cal Shur and in Aturo up front, but I just don't know if they have the depth. A lot of the things about Minnesota that gave Purdue problems specifically are gone. I just don't know if the team that beat the Minnesota team that beat Purdue twice in the last couple weeks of the season last year hasn't been decimated. I don't know what they're capable of. They've got some good young players. I just don't know if they have enough of them. If I had to pick a dark horse, I might say Purdue. I know I know that's a bad answer because they're not necessarily a dark horse when you're picked third, but I think Purdue has started to earn a little bit of benefit of the doubt here. I think Matt Painter is sort of getting a little bit of the Bo Ryan bump here, where people they pick against Purdue long enough, and then when they finish top three, top four in the league enough, people start to realize, hey, he does this every year. Maybe we ought to start predicting them to do that. I think, Purdue's got a great defensive core in Nojel Eastern and Matt Harms, arguably the two best positional defenders in the conference. That's a hell of a start. And if you can play good defense, you can win a lot of games. Purdue's going to have to recreate itself offensively, but there's nobody in the Big Ten that can match the tandem inside of Matt Harms and Travion Williams, inside, outside. I think Purdue's got two of the top 5 or 6 big men in the conference. That's a good start. I think Purdue's got a lot of shooters. I think they're unproven, but I think they're very capable. So Purdue might be getting back to that situation they had a couple years ago where you had a really strong interior presence and then the sort of shooters to provide the sort of balance that can make for a pretty winning combination offensively. When you combine that with what Purdue should have defensively, I think they're a pretty safe pick to win a lot of games.
Since we can, Brian, we're not coaches, we're not players, let's jump ahead to March. Mm-hmm. What's a reasonable expectation for Purdue in the NCAA tournament?
Well, you know what? I would have said Purdue last year was probably a team that was going to struggle to get into the tournament, let alone damn near go to the Final Four. And so my recent credibility in terms of answering this question is probably shot. But I think that this is an NCAA tournament team for sure. Obviously, you never know if somebody gets hurt or whatever. You don't know about that stuff. But I think this is a team that can get to the NCAA tournament for sure. and I don't see any reason why they can't win a game or two. I think they've got great big men, and that's a good start. If they're a good defensive team, which they should be, that's a good start as well. So I think this is a pretty high upside team with pretty good intangibles, great leadership, good character, skilled. I don't see any reason why they can't get to the tournament and at least win a game.
One more basketball question for Brian before we get some recruiting in football. Brian, I got to ask you, I'm sure the listeners, the viewers out there would love to hear your take on that third quarter by Carson Edwards a few nights ago. 8 3-pointers. Just give us your early impressions of Carson Edwards as an NBA player.
Well, it's the same as it's always been. You know, people get hung up on size because you got to start somewhere. You know, I know that there were other questions with him as an NBA prospect, kind of beyond size. But the one thing that you will make a lot of money in the NBA doing, if you can do it, is scoring. And what he did in that third quarter the other night for the Celtics is what I've been watching for the better part of 3 years now. I mean, this is what he is. He's a shot maker. He's a scorer. He has that singular focus on doing just that, on just scoring. And, you know, people can talk about him only being a 6-foot scoring guard, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as much as people think it does. When a guy can shoot from 30 feet, you know, and do it well, and do it, you know, I don't want to say consistently because he's not proven that at that level yet, and I'm not going to say consistently because obviously his college season last year had its ups and downs. The ups obviously far more acute than the downs, but I just think he's a special scorer, and I think he's playing for the right coach. I think a coach who understands that this is what he is, and I'm gonna play to his strengths. Whereas a lot of people would just take him as a second rounder, try to make him something he's not. You know, the best thing that happened for Carson Edwards last year from an NBA perspective was showing everyone the point guard thing. Stop talking about that because that is not what he is. And I think last year illustrated that he is not the player people wanted him to be because of his height, because of his dimensions. But it amplified and it laid bare in no uncertain terms. This guy is a scorer, and if you're drafting him, you need to draft him as a scorer and not try to make him something he's not.
Yeah, special night in that preseason game in Cleveland for Edwards. And on the recruiting front, Brian, this weekend, Purdue literally and figuratively has a big visitor on campus for basketball. Zach Edey, 7'3", 285-pound Canadian.
Yep.
Purdue's in hot pursuit of, and again, he'll be in West Lafayette. Give us the lowdown on Zach Edey.
Yeah, he's as you said, 7'3", 285 pounds. He's from Canada, plays at IMG Academy in Florida, so he goes from both ends of the climate spectrum.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it tells you what you need to know when I just say 7'3", 285 pounds. You know, he's only been playing basketball a couple of years. He was a pitcher and a defenseman in hockey prior to that. Grew considerably. I have not seen him play. From what I'm told from people who have seen him play, he is surprisingly light on his feet for his size. He is surprisingly savvy and skilled for a player who's not been playing very long. But obviously size. When you're that big, you have a lot of advantages, provided you're not, you know, a statue. And by every account, he's not a statue. I think this is probably one of those high-risk, high-reward types of recruits where you don't know what you have if you get him just because you don't have the body of work to this point to gauge him on. But obviously Matt Painter went down to see him in person, watched him work out. Other people have corroborated that he's good enough to play at a high level by the fact that they've offered him. Baylor, Minnesota, Seton Hall are 3 high majors who've offered him. He cut out a whole year out of recruiting by reclassifying up from the 2021 class to 2020 class. So had he stayed in 2021, who knows, a year from now, when he plays a high-level schedule at IMG Academy this year, and then would have played another year of AAU next year, who knows what he would have had. So obviously Purdue's not alone in liking this guy at the high major level. You can't teach that size. Purdue knows how to use size like that because at 7'3", 285, he's actually bigger than Isaac Haas was coming out of high school, if you can believe that. He looks like a proportional human being too, just like Isaac Haas did. He might not be as chiseled yet. I don't know. I'll get to see him tomorrow at Purdue, but obviously Purdue wants size, and you're not going to find size at this level very often. So Purdue's willing to take a flyer here, obviously.
And yesterday, you didn't have to travel too far to get a recruiting update football-wise from West Lafayette High School's Yanni Karloftis, a four-star linebacker. I think right now Rivals rates him as the second-best player in Indiana in the class of 2021. Again, you've posted on our website your interviews with Yanni. Tell us a little about your conversation with the little brother of George Karloftis.
Yeah, he visited Purdue again on an unofficial visit earlier in the week. I could have called him just to get his thoughts on it, but I figured I live 5 minutes away. I might as well just go over there. So I went over there to talk to him in person. I don't think he's gonna show his cards too much at this stage of the recruiting process. I don't think he's closing in on a decision or anything like that, though I wouldn't have thought George was closing in on a decision either when he just abruptly committed a couple of late Octobers ago. But, everybody's always said about Yanni Karloftis that he's his own man, and I'm sure he is, but that he's not going to go to Purdue just because George did, just because his family's connected to Purdue. But that has never meant that he wasn't going to go to Purdue. I mean, Purdue still has a lot of advantages here in terms of that familiarity. I think the fact that Purdue told George, hey, you're going to come here, get an early opportunity, and we're going to invest in you and help you get good real fast, and we're going to help you get to where you want to go. And a couple months into that, other than the one-loss record, and there a lot of reasons go into that, George Karloftis is one of the best freshmen in college football. Everything that you could have hoped for George Karloftis, other than the one-loss record, for reasons outside their control, has been a smashing success. For Yanni Karloftis to see that, and then hear what Purdue's telling him in terms of the same things about how you can come to Purdue and you can be an impact guy right away, and you can develop quicker here, get more of an early opportunity, and get to where you want to go. I think that's really going to resonate with him. On top of the fact that his whole family is connected to Purdue. George will be at Purdue for at least one more year if Yanni Karloftis comes. Should Yanni want to go somewhere else, which would perfectly obviously be his right, he would have to be the one to say, okay, guys, you guys have to pick. Do you want to go see George play on Saturday here in town, or do you want to drive to wherever, Ann Arbor, Columbus, State College, not that you can drive there, whatever it may be, Madison. That would be a really hard thing to do from a practicality perspective. So for that reason alone, I've always said that no matter what people say about Yanni Karloftis going to do his own thing, Purdue makes a lot of sense. And I would have to think that when push comes to shove on this one, Purdue's going to have a pretty good chance.
Anybody who watches Purdue football knows there's a Yanni need at linebacker as well. So there'd be plenty of opportunity for Karloftis should he choose to sign with the Gold and Black.
That's one of the positions where they haven't had that breakthrough recruit yet. The wide receivers, the defensive line, the secondary, you might say running back. Now they've gotten that guy, that signature signee. That's the one thing Yanni Karloftis could represent. He would be the guy at that position. He would be the signature recruit at that position.
Before you go, Brian, give me your thoughts on the game at Iowa this weekend. A big one for Purdue. They're 2-4. They open the second half of the season. Purdue has won the last two matchups with the Hawkeyes. Give us your quick breakdown on how you see this thing unfolding on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, obviously Purdue has had Iowa's number the last couple of years, largely because of the vertical passing game. Does Purdue have the personnel right now to pull that off? Probably. Can they? I don't know. It's really hard to beat Iowa if you can't at least play them to a draw at the line of scrimmage. Purdue, I thought, did a good job last week scheming some productivity, throwing the ball up the field. They've showed some cards now. Iowa's going to be ready for some of those little tricks that they pulled to be able to get the ball down the field against Maryland. I think Iowa's significantly better than Maryland. Mm-hmm. I do think the Maryland win was really significant because Purdue needed success. It has to feel a lot better about itself now than it did a week ago. I think Purdue looked like a team that was starting to find some answers here amidst all of this personnel chaos that they've dealt with all season long. But I do think their ceiling remains relatively limited as long as they're so young and they're so thin and they're so just overall inexperienced across the board. I think Iowa is a team that's not going to beat itself typically. I know this maybe isn't the typical Iowa team, but I think that is relatively consistent about the Hawkeyes. They're not going to beat themselves. You know, Purdue obviously was able to turn Maryland over last week defensively. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's going to happen this week. But if Purdue gets a couple of breaks and Purdue builds on success against Maryland, I could see them keeping this close. I just think it's a lot to ask this Purdue team in this situation to go into Iowa City and win.
Big one for the Boilermakers, Brian Neubert. Make sure you check out the website this weekend. Again, he'll have all types of coverage on the basketball team's scrimmage/fan day on Saturday. Brian, thanks a lot for joining us. When we come back, we'll be joined by a Purdue all-time great, a College Football Hall of Famer, consensus All-American, number 9, Mark Herman. Check back in with us in just a few minutes.